All right, so this is the, I shouldn't say the or the, what this is my, basically it's a generic elk hair emerger. Okay, we're gonna have the wings back, nice little head. We're gonna have a custom dub body, which I'll get to in a minute, as well as some shuck or a tail. And yeah, the elk hair. So what we're going to be using is 8/0 uni thread and camel. It's just basically a brown color, so brown thread works too. You could probably do green or yellow if you wanted. What I have in the vise is Mustad 49S size 12 caddis hook. But also what I'll use too, because I can get these more abundantly, is the TMCO TMC 2457. Not quite the same shape, but anyway, I think this is a good quality hook for this pattern. So hook pattern doesn't necessarily matter all that much as long as it's curved. So as with every pattern, we got to start a thread. And what I like to do is start my thread. For those of you that follow me, I usually use a bodkin width to determine where I want to start my thread. And so in this case, I want about 3 from behind the eye of the hook. Boy, I cannot talk today. From behind the eye of the hook to where your thread starts. And then we're just going to wrap this back. Now, if you want to use this as your leftover thread as a ribbing, you can totally do that with this pattern for sure. And we don't need a perfect underbody here because we're going to use dubbing, but you do want to try to keep it somewhat even, just so that, for nothing else, practice, right? So we're going to go back to about the bend. I'm going to cut this off, but if you want to use this for ribbing, save it and do not cut it off. I want to add a different material for that. Next is what we need is some Antron yarn for the shuck. And I've got, this is just stone brown Antron from Wapsi. This stuff works just fine. So what I'll do, because I don't need the whole rope, right? That's a lot for a 12. I mean, I guess you could if you wanted to, if you want to get it all thick tail. What I like to do here is split it into about thirds. You can see that, I've got it in about thirds. It's a little out of focus. Roughly anyway. And then I only want to pinch off ½ inch or so is what I'm going to call it, I guess. I kind of transfer that measurement so I can trim it away. But really you just need enough to tie in. We're going to have this tail or the shuck hanging down like this. So I like to taper these a little bit. You can see I've got a bunch of straight stuff right there, and I've kind of got this long guy right there. I'm going to get rid of that long one, and then I'm just going to kind of play with this Antron yarn and roll around my fingertips a little bit, transfer sides, so we get something more like that where it's a little bit you got a few strands hanging off, longer, you know, short, medium, large. You guys kind of get it. So, but what I want is all this stuff hanging down, right? So once you get it to where you're happy, and I'll take that. Oh, those long ones went. That's cool. But you want it about a hook shank somewhere in there. So I'll just transfer it and pinch it on, and I'm going to do a loose turn over the top. I'm going to come one to the front, one to the back, and now if this starts to move on you, your shuck, like it just did me, it kind of rolled towards the camera side. Then I'm going to lift that up and put it back where I want it and do an extra one, as well as one underneath. So it kind of hangs off something like that. And then I'm going to start wrapping forward. They don't need to be tight and touching or anything, just Try to keep them somewhat even. If you have a little bit of rigidness in there, that's okay. The main thing here is to keep that antron on top of the hook shank. And then just before I get to where I started my thread, which is right here, I'm going to come in with my scissors and trim that out. So I've only got this little bit left. You can lick your finger and push that down. Come forward with it and stop right there. So that's basically how we get this guy going. So next, what I'm using is basically some holographic tinsel. It's kind of a purplish in color. I've got it right here. It's called flashy fiber. I use a lot of this stuff for, I shouldn't say a lot of this stuff. It's this is what I use, but I use a lot of it for tails and flash to streamers. But it also makes some very interesting ribbing and some really cool bodies too. I know it says wing material, but there's definitely some other cool properties that you can use this on. So anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of those out. It's basically like flash boo, but tinsel style, I guess. It's got a purple hue to it. So I'm going to tie that in on my side, on the far side. And I'm going to just draw gently that material out. No, we don't want to do that. That's what happens when you start looking between the camera and what you're doing. So we want to catch this in on the far side, make 2 or 3 turns, pull that back until you slide that. Can you see that? There you go. Till you slide that material just underneath your thread like so. So it's still catching and hanging on. That's the way we got to do it. All right, now we're going to move this out the way. We're going to wrap back. And you don't need any, you don't have to be fancy here. You know, I'm going slow. I like to methodically tie these patterns so that I'm doing it the same way every time, or at least the same techniques. But you could just whip that back and call it gravy. So what we've got here, and what we got to use next is this. It's just a custom dubbing blend that I do. It's just or another variation of one that I do. So I know you can't see it all that well. Let me see if I can take some out. So what it is it's a I mix it in full bags just for easy measurements. So what this is it's 1 full bag of Antron dubbing mixed with Cahill cream Antron dubbing. I'm sorry, it's one bag of Antron Cahill cream dubbing. Misread my own writing. Then 1 bag of Beaver light Cahill and 1/4 rabbit mask. So anyway, that's what it is, and you're gonna get a little bit of flashy property to it. And you're going to get some stuff that sticks out and jolts around, and it dubs pretty well too. So it's kind of a good blend, but always play around with your dubbing blends. Make sure you always get some sort of natural hair in there, so when you dub that body, whatever it is, it's all scruffy, and you know that makes for a better body presentation wise. You're getting more movement in the water. Think of it that way. So anyway, we don't need a lot here. And you don't need to use dubbing wax either when you dub this. So I'm just going to turn that to the side. I just use good old spit on this because I want loose fibers to trap, and we're going to dub this pretty thin. So, get that guy off my finger, man. I just had this like little ant or wasp or something bite me in my arm. So we want to just dub this kind of thin, pull it apart. There we go. Man, that little sucker bit me good, man. I got this little red mark on my arm now. Anyhow, sorry. So you can bring it up just before So when you dub, I guess I should start off with, make sure you're twisting your fingers in the same direction. It doesn't really matter which way you start twisting it, but whichever direction, whether it's clockwise or counterclockwise, make sure you still continue to twist that way throughout the process of putting a noodle on your thread. So you can see how this is all inconsistent and everything, and that's, you know, that's not a super big deal. Because we're gonna get some stuff like that that's gonna come flying out. And now what I'm doing is I'm wrapping back into the bend with this dubbing, or just before that dubbing really takes hold like it did there. And I got my first turn in, and now I can start bringing this forward, and you're gonna start to get all this crazy, what's this, bug night, man? I'm getting attacked by moths now. Just got bit by something. Now I got moth in my face. Anyway, sorry, getting off topic there. But you can literally just keep rotating this dubbing and moving slow. And you can kind of see how it's giving you this scruffy body that's got, maybe it's not turned quite the right way, but it gives you this scruffy body with some shine to it. And it just looks really cool in the water when it gets wet when you use these colors together, because it kind of turns like a, almost like a translucent cream gray color, which is really neat. And so we just want to cover up, you know, the body here. And it's like I said, this part doesn't have to be perfect. If it starts to get too thick, twist it out. This isn't the easiest dubbing one to get like a smooth, consistent body out of, that's for sure, but it's not the point of it either. So we're going to bring that dubbing all the way up, just like so, to where we ended our thread, or just past. Or not where we ended, where we started our thread, or just past. Okay. So now we've got my tail sticking out down here. We've got this scruffly stuff, which is great. And now we're going to counter wrap with the flash material. You could probably use crystal flash here if it was like opal or something like that. You could use that as a good substitute for this flashy fiber. We want to get a good 4 or 5 turns into that body before we tie off. And each one of these strands too, they're pretty long. I forgot what I measured them at, like 14 inches or 12 inches for sure. You get a lot of material for that, especially if you're going to do stuff like this. So anyway, we wrap that flash about 5 turns forward. We're going to tie it off. And again, with this kind of flash, most flash, I'm going to flip it over, run it to the back, and trim it away. And I do say trim it away because if you're using this thin fiber or Flashabou or something like that for ribbing on these flies, and you try to rip it away, it's going to end up going curly-Q on you, and you're going to end up wasting a lot of it. So now you can kind of come in and groom this. You can pluck it out or just leave it. Oh, I even nicked myself there. That was awesome. Kind of like so. All right, so now what we need is elk hair. So we're going to get our elk hair patch, and we're going to try to just fill between the point and the bottom of the shank, because this is an emerging pattern. We don't need it to be, or we don't want it to be super light, but we don't want it to be super heavy either. So that's why we have the nymph hook. Now we're going to add a little hair, which is more buoyant, and try to keep it more in the middle water column. So I'm going to pinch that tight, and so you can see that I've got my hair between the bottom side of the shank there and my hook point. And for me, that's a good way to recognize about what I need for elk and deer hair on these kind of patterns. And you can totally use deer on this too. You don't have to stick with elk. I'm just using elk for the color. It's bleached elk. So then you want to clean out any under fur. turn it around, anything that falls out, get rid of short stuff. Get rid of, I got some short ones there. All right. And so, after you've done that, let's stick it in the hair stacker and give it some wax. Not W-A-X, W-A-C-K-S, wax. Whack it on the ground. I do it on the table, but it bumps the camera around. So what we're looking for is about something like this that's going to kind of hang out. This wing's going to hang out just into the butt of the butt of the bend. So it's right about there. You can kind of see like how these black tips are lining up with where everything starts to really. I'm sorry, the white tips start to end up right about where everything starts to really bend over in that caddishook, and then the black tips kind of fall off into the butt of the fly. So anyway, that's about what you want. So now that you have all that, what we need to do is we need to get, and you've transferred your distance, right? Don't forget to do that. And you've transferred your distance. What we need to do is we need to get rid of all this front stuff because it's going to be a problem. And so there's several ways you can do it. You can remove this now and trim all this off and deal with that flaring. You can totally do that. But we want a round head here, and so I prefer to actually deal with it as I go. So I'll do the half turn or full turn over, and I'll pull down, and I'm going to lift all this deer hair up. I'm going to pull down again. You can see each time I do that, it's flaring a little bit more. So what I'm doing is kind of training that hair where I want it to go. And I'm going to pull down and do the same thing. Each time working my thread, touching turns, tight touching turns to the back right here. That's what I've got there now, 4, I think, 5. So something like that. And if you lift your hand off, kind of like so, you get this nice little flare going out the back with these tips. Just, I mean, that's just, boy, I don't actually usually get them quite that close right where I want them. So luckily I nailed that one on the video. So once you do that, and we're going to lift all this hair forward, and we're going to draw back. We're going to bring our thread to the front, or jump it to the front, and we're going to put that thread right between the shank and that hair. And we're going to, you can see how I'm moving that thread. I'm kind of moving it and wiggling it to the back. I'm coming right across the top, moving it and wiggling it back. So what that's doing is we're getting a thread wrap right where we want it, right at the end of my nail there. And when you wiggle it to the back as you're coming across the back side, it's driving that thread into the hair. Right, so I think this is 4, I think. And see, now all of this stem, because we've been wedging it to the back, is all leaning backward. So now we can draw it back to the front. And we're going to put a couple more wraps right over top just to secure that. Now if this wing flares to the sides or it's not quite even, it's really not that big of a deal. This one, I got this one pretty good here. It's not that big of a deal. You can put a wrap underneath by lifting this back here up and forward like so and bringing your thread this way. You can do that. I don't think it's necessary with the shape of this body. I think it looks a little more natural, at least in my opinion. So, but to leave that unpropped so that it like really flies down onto that or sinks onto it. So anyway, enough said. So then what we're gonna do, I'm getting a little cut happy. We're gonna bring the thread back to the front, and we're gonna wrap this back a little more. Now we've just locked all of that hair in place, and we've got it away from the hook eye. So we need it away from the hook eye. And so we want to come in here and we want to cut this as close and as tight as possible. Something like that. That'll work. Now, what we're going to do is with our thread, we're going to jump the thread to the back. Right where our last wrap laid, we're going to lay a wrap on top of that, and then we're going to slowly work our way forward. And you're not going to capture everything at once. If you needed to, you could put a half hitch in here or something like that, wet everything and burn all this, and then just finish off your head, you can totally do that if you want to. But I usually just build the head like so, and just get a nice thick full head on this one. It's like I said, this is just a generic emerging pattern, so you could totally play with colors on this. Like you can go, I mean, whatever's fancy in your, or whatever fish fancy in your waters, like whether this is olive or yellow or blue or white, you know, you could totally make this pattern just like this. Use your favorite dubbing, so on and so forth. Pretty simple little pattern, but lays a good foundation for other flies that you're going to come across. So all I did there was just go ahead and clean that up. You can see I've got plenty of room behind my hook eye right there. Boom. And now we're just going to whip finish this. You could glue it shut, you can Solarez it, you can, you know, whatever you want. Leave it as a whip finish. There you go. So that's my generic Elk Hair Emerger. Like I said, you can use this with deer, change the colors, you know, it's just the pattern. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Like it, share it. And also, if you're not a member of our Facebook group, Fly Tying for Beginners, we'd love to have you there as well, so make sure to join that too. Thanks for watching.